Episode 16, A Roll of the Dice. Greetings and welcome back, dear listeners. You've wandered into my dark and sordid little corner of the world. My name, as you should all know by now, is Jessi, and I'm here to share the secret and hidden powers that affect everyday people. So sit back, put your feet up, and listen. There is another handwritten date on this one, July 23rd, 2010. Again, no indication on if this is the day of the report or the start of the incidents in question. Before I get into anything, I want you to know that I'm doing this now because it's one of my fleeting lucid moments. I don't know when I'll be me again. I don't even remember coming here, I just was here. Basically, I'm just warning you that I don't know how long I'll be able to talk to you before the other me comes out. Before I disappear again, maybe forever this time. My name is Isabella. Most people call me Izzy. I don't know how to explain this in a way that you'll understand, but I'm probably the highest stakes gambler in the world. Hell, I'd bet on it that I am. I know. You think of girls in casinos and you probably think of enticingly dressed servers, maybe show dancers, burlesque, that sort of thing. But there are more than a few of us who are serious gamblers, and many of us dominate our respective games, and that's me. I dominate, well, basically any dice game nowadays, but at the time this all began, it was craps. I had a sort of connection, almost, to the dice. Didn't matter if they were mine or someone else's, if they belonged to the house or not. I could make any hardaway or any hop with a near 100% guarantee. I got tossed from more than a few casinos for thinking I was rigging it somehow, palming the dice to replace them with weighted ones or using some special technique. They were right in a way, just not the way they thought. I could see the outcome. If I concentrated on the dice, no matter what kind or where I was, even if someone else was rolling, I could see what they would roll. The first time it happened, I didn't believe it. I'd just gotten into the game, I didn't even really know what a hop bet was. But some jackass who thought they could hustle me told me I should try to guess the numbers that would come up, and if I won, he'd pay me triple whatever I'd bet. I'd been around long enough to know a hustle that obvious, but I was drawn in, like the dice, like they wanted me there. So I bet on 6 and 3 hopping. The dice told me that would be the roll. And it was. Honestly, I don't know who was more surprised, me or the hustler. He paid up, of course. Those TV shows where the hustlers get all physical when they're trumped or call off the bet, it doesn't happen like that. Especially if you've made that bet in front of the dealer or in the middle of a bustling casino with dozens of potential witnesses, they pay up. Now, once you leave those witnesses, well, that's a bit of a different story. So I didn't push it. I took my winnings, I thanked him, and I left. I knew I could make more. Not like those gambling addicts who know there are big scores coming. No, I actually knew it. I couldn't tell you how, but I did. So I went to another casino. They're pretty easy to find most of the time. Big flashy signs, giant highway signs everywhere. And even here in Canada, there's way more than a few in each town. The one that I went to after that was smaller, still large, but not as busy. I beelined for the craps table, more than a little eager to put this new knowledge of mine to the test. I started betting on other people's rolls at first, and I was right every time, but I threw the bet a couple of times, didn't want to be accused of being a cheater. But I knew each roll. The moment the shooter decided to roll, I knew the outcome. Eventually I started rolling, and that's when things got interesting. I had been testing my new power here for a few weeks, and made a tidy little sum for myself. I always made sure to bet low, not to garner too much attention. But when I started rolling, I discovered I could force the roll that I wanted. Like the dice said they'd roll a 9, 5, and 4 respectively, but I needed a 7, so I told them I wanted a 7, and sure enough, 5 and 2. 7. Tried again, saying I needed an 11, only one way to get that, and wouldn't you know it, 6 and 5. I'm not ashamed to say that I took advantage. I hustled a few people, throwing the first couple of rolls only to clean sweep when they made bigger bets. That's when I started getting thrown out of establishments. And then he appeared. Mr. Lucky. I knew it wasn't his real name, of course, but that's what he insisted on being called. He found me after I'd been tossed out after winning 500 G's in one night. I'll admit I'd been a tad greedy there, and more than a little drunk. Of course, the casino had refused to pay out that large an amount, claimed I was cheating and hustling. They were right, of course, but not in any provable way, so I was a little pissed and kicked the side entrance they'd escorted me out of. And there he was, smoking a cigarette out of one of those long stem holders like some Disney villain. He wore a nice three-piece suit pinstriped a striking navy blue. He was a smaller man, but there was a a presence of sorts that made him seem taller, imposing almost. He smiled at me, called me by name, said he'd been watching me, knew what I could do, told me he'd been gathering others with our abilities. He had his own casino, he said. No betting limits, no membership. I laughed. I was drunk, but not that drunk. He smiled at me and handed me his card anyways. Told me to think it over, give him a call when I was more sober, that he'd be waiting. There was a inevitability, a certainty in his voice that actually gave me pause. I mean, every con man in the book knows that rule numero uno is seem confident, but there was a genuine sureness there. Like he knew I'd call him, like there was no other alternative. I even kept the card and looked back a couple times as I stalked away. Then I went back to my hotel. Since I moved from casino to casino, I'd been in hotels for months. Fancy ones too, not the little local owned by one person almost motels that every town has. No. Those fancy 200 to 300 a night places with heated floors and room service on speed dial. I sprawled on the bed, tossed the weirdo's card off into a corner, and promptly passed out. Since I was a big spender there, I didn't really have a set amount of days I was staying. I'd given the manager enough for a month, but told him that if I left early to just keep the change. I like to share the wealth. The next day I got up at noon. Best part of my lifestyle, sleeping in. I took a long hot shower and sat in those comfy robes, scrolling through the satellite TV options. I had no other casinos close to there, so I figured I'd lounge about for a day or two and then check out and head to the next one. I had plenty of cash to last, and I like to be lazy. But as I scrolled through generic show after generic show, I found my eyes being pulled to that corner where I knew Mr. Lucky's card was. Other people like me, huh? Could they control the dice too? Would it be a challenge for once? I found myself bending over to pick it up before I even realized I'd left the bed. I sat at that comfy armchair in the room next to the tiny table they provide and looked over the card. It was plain white stock imprinted with a 4-leaf clover. I rolled my eyes at that and flipped it over. Mr. Lucky and a phone number. That was it. I didn't recognize the area code. I tossed it to the table and shook my head. This was too much. Me controlling the dice was one thing, but a collection of super-powered people all gambling with who knows how much money? But as I turned around, I could feel that pull. The desire to win, not for the money. That was just a nice bonus. No, it was the idea of the challenge, the win, the adulation of destroying competitors. I found myself dialing the number on the hotel room phone as the sun began to set. It picked up on the first ring. He didn't ask my name, just said he was glad I'd called. Said he had a craps table ready to go with me, and some schlebs for me to start with. I smiled at that. Of course I wouldn't be taking on whales right away. I had to build up to that. The challenge was on. How many poor saps could I send crying home before Mr. Lucky gave me the challenge I was waiting for, the challenge I was craving? He told me an address that I could show up whenever I wanted. I was there that night. I was surprised to see a pretty upscale-looking apartment building. I'd been expecting some back-alley place with a special code knock and a slit in the door like on TV. Instead, there was a rather nice-looking doorman, dressed in a well-maintained red coat. He had a name tag that read Betherwee, and he moved a little oddly, but welcomed me in. Asked me if I had brought my own dice, and I said no. He smiled and pulled a small pouch from his pocket, said these were the house dice, if I wanted. I took them, the whole thing seeming a little odd. These dice spoke to me like any others, and I gave them a few test rolls just to be sure. They did as I asked, rolled all the numbers I wanted. I walked past Batherway and found the lobby was barren. A weird mix of white and brown with a small check-in counter. To one side was a small elevator with a small 4-leaf clover where the button should have been. I pressed it, and the door opened immediately. Mr. Lucky was inside, already waiting. He smiled and asked me how the dice rolled for me. I told him they worked and felt kinda nice. He grinned, said they were hand-carved bone, polished and lacquered, perfectly balanced. I felt a little weird holding bone dice, but it wasn't the first time. Some of the more upscale casinos used bone and ivory, so I just took it in stride. The elevator went up, something else that surprised me, and we exited onto what I can only assume was the penthouse floor. The elevator went up to the room, and the room took up the whole floor. The walls were all windows, tinted against the moonlight. It was well lit, and there were servers with alcohol, low music playing, the sound of cards being shuffled, the smell of gamblers smoking, and of course the clacking of dice. My head turned at that sound, and I could see Mr. Lucky grinning at that. He took me by the elbow and gently led me to the craps table, where I could see there were some wannabes making and losing chump change. I'm talking less than 5 G's a bet. Pennies. "This table is yours," he whispered to me. It was the first time that I could feel it, the other me. I felt like I was watching myself as we walked to the table and started placing bets. With no limits, and knowing that we could take advantage of whatever our power was, I cleaned house. Took all those poor schlubs for what they were worth. They all left broke, and it felt good. Really good. We wanted more, and Mr. Lucky provided, sending more my way. I don't know exactly how long we were ruining these minnows, but every time one left, another appeared. We never lost. How could we? The sun had risen and set I don't know how many times before I turned away from that table exhausted. The other me was gone, but I was too tired to even question what had happened. Mr. Lucky paid out, trading my chips for a few hundred G's. His smile was still painted on his face, and he invited me back whenever I wanted. I got back to the hotel and flipped on the TV. It was on the news, mentioning some missing people. I shrugged and flipped it to some sitcom and fell asleep to it. I went back the next day, and again Betherwee was there. He handed me a new pouch with a new set of dice. Again I tested them, and again they were perfect. I knew that they were bone or ivory again, but I was somehow used to it already. The other me took over before I even hit the button. Mr. Lucky was there again, and again I owned the table. These minnows were worth a bit more, and were more satiating. I left before sunrise the next day, feeling altogether thrilled. I'd finally found a place where I could use my powers however I wanted. The only price seemed to be this other me. And that me was still me, still doing what I wanted, right? For whatever reason, I didn't question it. No, that's not true. It was more like I didn't want to question it. I waited a day before I went back, and again there were some bigger fish. This time the other me tried out some other games just to see. Some poker, some blackjack. The chips seemed to be carved from bone too, and even the cards seemed to have that lacquered appearance. We did okay at those tables. Lost a bit more than we gained, but they weren't really our game anyways. We did discover that some of the people at those tables were indeed like me, able to bend the cards to their wills. There was a bit of mutual respect there, and they never took us for everything, though they definitely could have. When some of them drifted to our table, we did the same. Professional courtesy. Days turned to weeks, and the fish just kept getting bigger. Some of them could bend the dice too, but nowhere near as well as us, and we crushed them, made millions. Every few days we got new dice, the dealers new cards. Even the chips seemed to change out. My time at the hotel was long over, but at this point I was spending far more time at this casino than anywhere else. I had boatloads of cash, but I never really went anywhere to spend it. Then the other me started spending more time in control, and I started to lose huge chunks of time. It was like I'd blink and suddenly it was a different day, and I was somewhere else. I found myself in a yacht one time, no idea who I was with or why I was there. Another time I was in a Walmart, with a cart overflowing with just boxes and boxes of mac and cheese. Another I was in an alleyway just standing there. I began trying to stay away, but the other me would take us back there, and I'd come too over the craps table, surrounded by chips and cash. And dice. So many dice. All hand-carved, all bone. I asked Betherwee where the dice came from once. I was me at that point, and leaving that strange place. He just smiled that odd, tilted grin. He told me, from bones, of course. I asked, what bones? He just said, from losers who didn't need them anymore. A chill ran down my spine, and for the first time, I noticed all the missing persons posters as I walked to a new hotel, and just how empty the street was. I found a chip in the sidewalk at one point, and when I grabbed it, it melted. Like it just turned to liquid and seeped through my fingers. I tried talking to the other me in the mirror. I begged and pleaded that we stay away, that the money and winning, it wasn't worth it, not anymore. I don't know if they heard me, but I was me for a few weeks after that. Then once again, I found myself at that table, the chips, the dice clacking. Beside me, a server offered a drink, and the cup was a hollowed-out skull. I toppled backwards a bit and saw that everyone else had one, a skull they were holding, half were drinking from it, the other looking as pale as I did. And I saw the room clearly for the first time. The tables were made from bones, femurs and arm bones acting as legs, ribs glued together as the tops. The chairs were covered in skin and hair. The cards and dice were shining a bleached white. The windows were covered in cobwebs. The floor seemed to be pulsing as if it were breathing. I think the other me saw it too, because I felt not only the shock and disgust from me, but from someone else too. And then I rolled again. My hands moved on their own, rolling 7s and 11s over and over, the chips changing hands constantly. The cards being shuffled sounded a lot like bones clacking together. The drinks smelled heavy and metallic. I tried to run, but I couldn't leave the table. It was only when I passed out, probably from hunger, that I left. Or the other me did. I don't know anymore. And then I found myself here, just outside your door. I don't know why the other me brought me here. I'm barely aware of who you are. But I can feel the dice calling, the chips clacking. I know that when I leave, I know where I'll find myself again. And I know that I'll win again and again and again. And I know the losers will lose far more than their money. And I'll get new dice when they do. There's a couple things here that immediately jump out at me, listeners. The doorman, Betherwee, of course. I'm sure it's far less coincidence than it seems. The lobby too, the weird brown and white, with nothing but a counter and an elevator, eerily similar. Perhaps the most interesting part, this other me that she mentioned. Was it part of her before this Mr. Lucky appeared? Does it want to help? I mean, they brought her to whoever made this report, these investigators that seem to jump in and out of these sagas. Then the other thing, the whole illusionary aspect of it, somehow hiding that everything was made of bones. An infinite hotel, a house with rooms built from different times, a casino made of bones. As always, this brings up more questions than it does answers, something I'm very quickly getting tired of. There is another page here, one that I think gives a bit more context. Apparently, whoever these investigators are, they did some looking into reports of missing persons and found that in 2010, every province in Canada reported the exact average number of missing persons compared to the previous decade. According to this Isabella, she'd beaten dozens, possibly hundreds, of people who were all presumably killed as a result. And we know that she wasn't the only winner there. Even if only half were reported, there should have been a monstrous uptick in missing persons reports, and yet nothing. The number being the average like that definitely strikes me as weird, at the very least. People being able to manipulate luck is surprisingly not as modern an idea as you would think. Chance-based games are known to go all the way back to biblical times, Greek, even ancient Egyptian. Usually divinely blessed, these people were said to be able to influence luck itself, changed predetermined events. Most of them ended up punished for some form of hubris related to it. As always, thank you for listening. I can say that this has definitely turned me off of casinos. I kind of like my bones where they are, thank you very much. But what about you, Dark Wanderers and not? Did this tale of bending luck and murder sway you, or is the world as it seems enough for you? Until the next, let's cross that veil together.